Welcome back to Beyond the Feature, a podcast that isn't about chasing the latest shiny button in your software. We're about workflows, the systems and the habits that actually move the needle for your organization. I'm your host, Dr. Patrick Jones, Doctor of Education Leadership, Microsoft Innovative Educator Expert, Director of Cloud Strategies over at AuditSolve, and apparently someone who can't stop writing books. So if you want to know more about what I'm up to, the courses, the books, all of it, you can visit me at drpjj21.com or head over to beyondthefeature.com for everything related to this show, including links to the app. Now, today's episode, I want you to pay attention to the title because I mean it. It's called Security is Not a Feature, It's a Workflow. Say that out loud for me for a second. Security is not a feature. Too many people, too many organizations, honestly, treat security like it's a checkbox, like it's something you set up once, turn on, and forget about it, like it's an option in the menu instead of the foundation of the house. And that mindset is costing people. It's costing businesses. It's costing nonprofits. It's costing real people their data, their money, and in some cases, their entire organization. So today we're going to talk about what's actually happening out there in the real world, why organizations of every size, and I mean every size, from 3 people to 3,000, are getting caught with their guard down. And then we're going to flip the script. We're going to talk about what changing your workflow, building security into how your people actually work day to day looks like in practice. All right, let's get into it. All right, let's set the table with some real numbers, because sometimes you need the numbers to make it real. So according to Verizon's 2025 data breach investigation report, and this is one of the most cited reports in cybersecurity every year, ransomware was present in 44% of all breaches analyzed. Now you hear that number and maybe you think, okay, big corporations, enterprise companies, and that's a them problem, right? No. Here's where it gets personal for the audience I care about most. Small businesses, nonprofits, mid-sized organizations running lean teams. For larger organizations, ransomware showed up in about 39% of their breaches. For small and medium-sized businesses, 88%. Let that land for a second. If a small business gets hit, there's almost a 9 in 10 chance ransomware is involved. Nice. 9 in 10. And another number that I want you to write down, 78%. That's the percentage of small and medium-sized businesses who say a major cyber incident could put them completely out of business, not just hurt them, out of business, gone. Now let me tell you about some actual incidents, because I think real stories land harder than statistics alone. Back in November of 2024, Ahold Delhaize, parent company of grocery chains like Stop and Shop, Food Lion, and Giant Food, they were hit by a cyber attack that disrupted pharmacy services, e-commerce operations, and exposed the data of over 2 million people. 2 million names, social security numbers, dates of birth, government-issued ID information, gone. And this wasn't some tiny operation with a part-time IT guy. This was a global retail conglomerate. But here's what I find instructive about a story like that. The attack didn't start with a brilliant hacker outsmarting a firewall in some Hollywood-style sequence. These attacks almost never do. They start with a person, a click, a credential, a weak spot in the human layer. And speaking of the human layer, 82% of breaches are caused by human behavior. Not technology failures, human behavior. Clicking the wrong link, using the same password, trusting the wrong email. A 2024, I think, CyberArk study found that 49% of employees reuse the same credentials across multiple work-related applications, nearly half. And 36% of those same passwords are for personal accounts too. So when your credentials get pulled from some other breach site, which happens all the time, an attacker now has the keys to your work environment too. And get this, in 86% of web application attacks, The attacker got in using stolen credentials. Stolen credentials. That means the front door wasn't broken down. Someone handed them the key. Now, I want to mention something that really hits home for the healthcare and education communities, because I know a lot of you are in those verticals. In 2024, HIPAA fines and settlements in the U.S. more than doubled from the year before, totaling over $9 million just in penalties, not in recovery costs, just in fines. And on the education side, schools and universities are some of the most frequently targeted institutions because they hold enormous amounts of personal data on students and staff, and they often run with limited IT budgets and aging infrastructure. Here's another one that might hit closer to home, and this one is about a staffing franchise. A Manpower franchise location in Lansing, Michigan, was hit by the Ransom Hub ransomware group. The attack exposed the data of over 144,000 individuals, employees, job candidates, people who just applied for work, names, social security numbers, passport scans, driver's licenses. And what's interesting about this one is that corporate headquarters had to come out and clarify that their systems weren't compromised, just the franchise, a smaller operation. Sound familiar? Smaller operations are the target, not because they're less at stake, but because there's less protection. And that's the conversation I want to have with you today. So now that we've looked at the landscape, I want to talk about why this keeps happening. Because this isn't new. Cybersecurity has been a topic for decades. We've had firewalls and antivirus software and spam filters for years. So why are breaches going up, not down? I'll tell you why. Because most organizations have approached security as a technology purchase, not a cultural practice. You buy the tool, you flip the switch, you feel safe. And then someone in accounting clicks on a fake invoice email and the whole thing unravels. Here's the thing I tell organizations I work with through AuditSolve all the time. Technology can reduce risk, but it can't eliminate the human factor. The human factor is almost always where the breach begins. So think about your typical workday for a moment. How many emails come through? How many links get clicked? How many shared documents are accessed? How many times does someone log into a system with a simple password they've been using for 3 years? Every single one of those moments is a potential entry point. And if your organization hasn't built security into the workflow of those moments, not just a policy document that lives in a drawer somewhere, but as a living practiced habit, you are exposed. More than 77% of organizations do not have an incident response plan. That's not a small number. That means if something happens tomorrow morning, the majority of organizations are figuring out as they go, calling people, Googling what to do, hoping. That's not a strategy. And here's something that I find alarming. About 60% of companies have more than 500 accounts with non-expiring passwords, passwords that were set years ago by people who may not even work there anymore, sitting there waiting to be exploited. And the average employee has access to around 25,000 sensitive folders. 25,000, most of which probably don't need access to, but got it because permissions were never dialed back. This is a workflow failure, not a technology failure. The tools exist to solve all of these problems. The challenge is that organizations haven't built the habits, the processes, and the checkpoints that make security automatic. And I want to be fair here. I'm not blaming people. Most people are not trying to be reckless. They're trying to get their work done. They're managing a full inbox and a full calendar and deadlines and demands. And security feels like friction. It feels like one more thing. And that's exactly why security has to be woven into the workflow instead of bolted on top of it. All right, let's get practical now, because the goal of this show has never been to scare you into paralysis. It's to give you something you can actually do. So let's walk through what a security-minded workflow actually looks like for a smaller, mid-size, or nonprofit. So step 1, make multi-factor authentication non-negotiable. I mean this. Stop making it optional. Stop treating it as something for the tech-savvy staff only. According to Microsoft's own identity report, nearly half of small and mid-sized businesses still rely on passwords alone. No multi-factor authentication at all. If all it takes to access your system is a username and a password, you are one credential theft away from disaster. Multi-factor authentication, or MFA, is the single highest return on security investment you can make. It doesn't require a big budget. It requires a policy decision and about 15 minutes of setup per user. If you're on Microsoft 365, and a lot of you are, it's one of the core platforms we work with at AuditSolve, MFA is built in. Conditional access policies can enforce it automatically. This is one of the cases where the feature exists, but the workflow to enforce it doesn't. Build the workflow. All right, step 2, least privileged access. Give people what they need and nothing more. Remember that stat? The average employee has access to 25,000 sensitive folders. Ask yourself, does your receptionist need access to your financial records? Does your marketing intern need access to HR files? Probably not. And every unnecessary permission is an unnecessary risk. This is called the principle of least privilege, and it is one of the most underutilized security practices in small and mid-sized organizations. So do a quarterly access review. Look at who has access to what. When someone leaves the organization, revoke their access the same day. Not that week, not when you get around to it, the same day. All right, step 3, train your people. And I mean really train them. Not once a year, and not with a presentation they click through in 15 minutes to check a box. 91% of successful cyber attacks start with a phishing email. Phishing is not sophisticated. It's social engineering. It works because it exploits human instinct, urgency, curiosity, fear, trust, and the only defense against it is a team that knows how to recognize it. Regular training, simulated phishing tests, lunch and learns, short 5-minute briefings and staff meetings. Build it into the culture. Make it normal to talk about security the same way you talk about safety protocols or HR policies. And by the way, if you're looking for a place to start building that security knowledge base, I put together a book series. It's called Security Made Simple through Olympus Academy Press. It's out there on Amazon. These books are designed to specifically be approachable, not written for IT professionals specifically, but written for the humans who actually work in organizations and need to understand what they're dealing with. You can find the full catalog over at olympusacademypress.com, or they're on Amazon. All right, step 4, get serious about password hygiene. Use a password manager. Require complex passwords. Stop allowing password reuse. And for goodness sake, set your passwords to expire. 60% of organizations have hundreds of accounts with passwords that never expire. That's a ticking clock. If someone's password from 2020 is still active and they've left the company, or if that password was part of a data breach somewhere else on the web, that account is a liability sitting in your system right now. Password hygiene has to be a standing organizational workflow, not a one-time event. All right, step 5. Let's build an incident response plan and practice it. Over 3/4 of organizations have no plan for what to do when, not if, when something goes wrong. A plan doesn't need to be 80 pages long. It needs to answer who gets called, in what order, what systems get isolated, who communicates to clients or stakeholders, what's the recovery process. Run a tabletop exercise once a year. Sit in a room and walk through a scenario. Our accounting system just got hit with ransomware. Go. Walk through the decisions in real time. You'll find the gaps, and it's far better to find those gaps in a conference room than in an actual crisis. All right, step 6, audit your cloud permissions and configurations regularly. This one is especially relevant if you're running Microsoft 365, which most organizations we work with are. Cloud misconfigurations are a growing attack surface. 90% of organizations have sensitive files exposed to all employees through platforms like Copilot. Default settings are not security settings. They are convenience settings. And convenience and security are not always the same thing. Get a cloud security audit. Know what your environment actually looks like. Know who has admin rights. Know where your sensitive data lives. This is exactly the kind of work we do with clients, helping them understand their cloud footprints so they can make informed decisions, not reactive ones. All right. I want to close the instructional portion of this episode with something that I think most important piece. It's not a tool or a checklist. It's a mindset. Security culture is something you build. It doesn't happen by accident. And in small and mid-sized organizations, it usually has to start with leadership, with the director, the CEO, the executive director of the nonprofit, the person at the top who sets the tone. When leadership treats security as a priority, the team treats security as a priority. When leadership shrugs and says that's an IT problem, the team shrugs too. I want to give you a frame that I use when I work with organizations. Think of security the same way you think about fire safety. You don't install a sprinkler system and then never run a fire drill. You don't assume the extinguisher works because it was there when you moved in. You check it, you test it, you train people on what to do if the alarm goes off. You make it part of how the building operates. Security is the same thing. The tools are the sprinkler system. The training is the fire drill. The incident response plan is knowing where the exits are. All of it works together, and all of it has to be maintained. The organizations that are leaning and learning the hard lessons right now, the ones making the headlines for the wrong reasons, they didn't fail because they were bad at their core. They failed because they treated security as an afterthought. You don't have to be one of them. All right, let's bring it home. Security is not a feature. It's not a checkbox. It's not a once-a-year conversation. It's a workflow. And just like any workflow, it has to be designed, practiced, and maintained. So here's what I want you to do this week. Just pick one thing. One. Maybe it's turning on MFA for your whole team. Maybe it's doing a quick audit of who has admin rights in your environment. Maybe it's giving that extra training or being extra vigilant in your email so that you're not clicking on something that seems a little fishy, and that's fishy with a PH. Maybe it's scheduling a 30-minute conversation with your team about what they would do if they got a suspicious email. Just one thing. Start there. If you want to go deeper, and I hope you do, I've got resources to help you. Head over to the Olympus Academy Press, check out that Security Made Simple book series and all the other titles in the category if you're interested. These are practice, readable, real-world guides designed for people running real organizations. If online courses are more your speed, over at Olympus Academy, I've got stuff there too. And if your organization needs a real conversation about your cloud strategy, your Microsoft 365 environment, or where your security gaps might be, that's the work we do at AuditSolve. So don't wait for a breach to be the reason you reach out. You can find everything at beyondthefeature.com, the podcast, the new app, links to all the resources I just mentioned. And if you want to know more about me, the background, the books, the work, I do have a website, rpjj21.com. It has all of that. Now, if this episode was useful to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. A colleague, board member, a business owner, you know, who's been putting off this conversation, because the best security tool in the world is still awareness. And make sure you subscribe if you like this, if you want more of it. I'm Dr. Patrick Jones. Thanks for spending your time with me today on Beyond the Feature. Stay safe out there, and I mean that literally. We'll see you next time.